broadcasting live from unknown remote locations and not their parents' basements. It's B2B Tonight with Ryan O'Hara and John Mazza, featuring Josh Norman, Senior Vice President of Sales at Vimeo.
When we introduced Josh.
And Scott Leese, CEO and founder of Scott Leese Consulting. And now, everybody welcome our host, Ryan O'Hara.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to B2B Tonight. This is the place where we get a bunch of people to join us on a video chat, and they don't know we're live streaming out to all of you, which is really exciting. So, I just want to let people know some housekeeping. Obviously, we're recording this, so you will be able to see that we are recording this. John Mazza, what are you wearing?
You told me that this was going to be in costume.
That might be true, but I thought like you were going to dress up and class up. Like, look at me, I'm wearing a sweater vest. I look like a bad guy in the 90s.
And I'm Batman. I guess I won't wear this for the entire show.
Yeah, well, anyway, that's fine. We've got a good show for today. What we're going to be doing for the show is we're going to actually be talking to two really esteemed people. One person that we just discovered that we've never done anything together, and it feels like we've known each other for years. Scott Leese, we'll talk to him in a little while. Josh Norman lives literally the next town over from me. We should have done this in person. I don't know what we were thinking doing this remotely, but we are. We're really lame. But anyway, it's cool. We'll talk to those guys soon. The big theme for today that we want to talk about is breaking down how to be more effective in the full sales cycle. There's some little tricks and tips. There's some things we're going to break down with these guys that might even start at the top of the funnel. Before we do that, Mazza, what happened last week? Didn't we do some shooting somewhere? I can't remember what happened.
We did. We went on a long nature hike, and we got some fresh air for once, and we had an amazing time. We filmed some incredible sales tips for everybody.
I remember we were really dehydrated and hallucinating, and I think we might have said some sales tips that I think were pretty questionable. Let's find out how they were, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, most of what we say is questionable, so let's go with it.
Let's see what these sales tips are. We'll open up with this really quick. Let's see.
I was just enjoying the view. This is really pretty. Hear the nature sounds and stuff?
Everyone always talks about having an elevator pitch with an executive. So let's say you find an executive that you want to prospect into. All you need to do is hit the emergency button in the elevator while you're doing a pitch. Now you've got a whole presentation. Take out the PowerPoint, show them everything. That's a great elevator pitch.
So find the executives that you want to speak with, hunt them down, go to their offices, follow them, wait till they get into an elevator, get in that elevator with them, stop that elevator, and then you can literally have an elevator pitch.
This is me hitting the stop button. Everybody's got to do it.
That's like a great opening at the same time too. Hey, this is my elevator pitch. Ba-dum-bum. That would work. Tell me if you have already done this, because I've filmed myself for 30 minutes and an hour sitting at my desk, like nodding and agreeing. I'll just record a whole long video on Zoom to make it act like I'm listening and participating in the meeting, but I'm not actually doing it. Like right now, what time is it? It's like 3 o'clock. I'm on a Zoom meeting with Jason right now.
So that big meeting about the holiday project yesterday that you're managing, did you go? Were you actually there?
I think I had 3 meetings. Yeah, I haven't actually been to a meeting since I started in January. So.
Okay, so if you're a manager and you're someone that has to manage a lot of people and your email's out of control, you got people selling to you all the time, you got your people under you always emailing you, bosses above you asking if you're going to do stuff. Easiest way to deal with your inbox is set up an out-of-office reply message that auto-replies and says, sounds good. Think about it. Sounds good is the best response for everything. Hey, can you send us a report from last month? Sounds good. Hey, mind if I take next Friday off? Sounds good. Could you give me some advice on this call? Here's a recording of it. Sounds good. You're all set.
Oh my God.
I just earned your salary as a manager.
Huh.
That's leadership. That's leadership.
So smart. You're such a good manager.
This has been Sketchy Sales Tips with Ryan and John.
Yeah, we don't do those things. You can't do those things. It's bad. Let's get to our guest, huh? We should just get right to it, right, Mazza? Mazza, tell us a little bit about Scott Leese. Let's jump in and talk with Scott Leese.
So what can't you say about Scott Leese? Scott Leese, best beard on LinkedIn. First off, he's a founder of Surf and Sales, co-founder Thursday Night Sales. He's written many books, amazing books. 3-time author, strategic advisor, dozens of companies, and he's an all-around awesome guy. So we got Scott Leese.
And let's not forget, Scott also will probably plug Surf and Sales a million times during this. Scott, what's up, man? What's Surf and Sales? What's that?
How's it going, guys? My favorite part of the intro was that I just won the Best Beard Award of LinkedIn. I'm gonna cling to that one. I really appreciate that.
There was a committee. We got a group of people together in a smoky room and we figured it out.
Yeah. What do they say on LinkedIn? Like, I'm humbled and honored to accept this award, right?
Yeah, I think that's what you have to say. We'll give you a chance to give a great speech if you want, but I don't know if you have anything prepared.
No, nothing prepared. I'm happy to be here. It's good to chat with all of you.
So, Scott, I'm addicted to your content on LinkedIn. I watch a lot of it. Little sleeper thing here. I think that sales content on Twitter is usually pretty bad. And I think you have some really good content on Twitter. I like following you on Twitter and I stalk you and read all your tweets and stuff that you put out there. You're my Twitter guy. Like if someone said, hey, who's the most follow on Twitter? You should follow Scott on Twitter too. But I don't really talk about Twitter that much. I feel like everyone's on LinkedIn now, right?
Well, everyone's definitely on LinkedIn, but it's kind of funny. Like when the pandemic started, I was talking to Morgan Ingram and a couple other sales leaders, and we were a little bit bored with LinkedIn, and none of us had any kind of presence really on Twitter. Certainly not talking about business or sales related things. So we all kind of said, well, let's give this a go. And so we've been a little more focused over there. Justin Welsh was another one that was involved in this conversation. So I appreciate that. Ryan, do you remember one of the first times we ever spoke, what you told me? I bet you don't.
I don't. I hope it's not something that gets me canceled. Hashtag cancel Ryan. Let's get that trending, by the way.
It's not gonna get you canceled. It's not gonna get you in trouble. This is years ago. I don't even know how many years ago, but a long time ago. I remember you telling me that I needed to find like a niche with my LinkedIn content and that I talked about like too many different topics. And I remember thinking, man, fuck that guy. What is he talking about?
Oh no, cancel Ryan, it's happening.
Not in the bad way where I was like actually angry, but just like, wait a second. Nah, I don't think I'm gonna do that. And I don't think that I've done that. I think I talk about lots of different things. And now it's come full circle because you paid me a nice compliment saying you like the content that I produce.
Well, I said it because I wanted more people to see it, and now everybody knows who you are. So visionary. Where was I?
In a roundabout way, you accomplished your mission then.
I tried. It's hard to like somebody that wears a sweater vest, and that's the issue here. So Scott, we want to get into talking a little bit more about the full sales cycle and how to manage your full cycle sales reps a little bit more. Maz, talk about this a little bit more. Break this down. You said you had a question you wanted to ask him right off the bat, right?
Well, I always sucked at the full cycle sale. As Ryan and I were talking about it earlier, I couldn't close anything for shit, but I was really great at prospecting. So definitely wanted, if we could talk about some tips from beginning to end, because I think where I always used to fall off with the follow-up and who to follow up with. And I didn't want to be too pushy with the person that I was reaching out to. And I didn't know how pushy I needed to be. And like learning all those things was very difficult for me.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'd probably start, if I was coaching you, I'd probably start with your mindset. I mean, if I rewind the tape 30 seconds and listen to the words that you use the word pushy multiple times. So you associate follow-up with being pushy. And I would assume that you don't like to be treated that way and you feel pushed if people are like following up with you and so forth. So to me, I just think, okay, well, Jonathan is projecting how he feels like onto other people. And that narrative is going to be difficult to overcome if you keep telling yourself, if I follow up, if I ask for the business, if I try to close a deal, like I'm being pushy. That's going to hold you back. It's going to cause you to be tentative and be less confident and kind of self-assured. So I would start there, with you in particular. I think that holds a lot of people back. I don't think that you're alone in that. I think a lot of people have challenges with prospecting because they think, well, I don't want anybody to cold call me.
It's funny. I didn't have any problem on the prospecting end being pushy, which was weird, but it was like a mindset. As soon as I went into the closing role, it was like the follow-up felt pushy to me, but yeah. I wouldn't have any problem sending it, somebody 5 emails in a 8-day span or 10-day span or multiple phone calls or anything like that.
Yeah. I think a lot of it just has to do with the mindset around each part of the role. I've been a big proponent of full cycle sales reps, my whole entire career. I feel like if I'm teaching people only one part of the sales process, then I'm doing you a disservice. And at the end of the day, I really feel like a lot of what I do is teach. I teach people how to sell. I teach people how to manage, teach people how to lead, all that kind of thing. And it never sat right with me to only teach somebody part of it. I never liked hearing about how SDRs would get pigeonholed and unable to make a move into the AE role, right? They go interview for an AE role and they're like, well, Jonathan, we really like you, but you've never done this before. It's like, dude, how am I supposed to get the experience if nobody's going to pull the trigger, right? And then there's all the economic analysis you could do. People push the predictable revenue SDR AE model all the way down into $300 a month deals. It's like those economics make no sense, right? I'm pretty sure when Aaron Ross was writing that book and coming out with his model, he wasn't thinking about SMB sales when he was writing it. So people read things and they just apply it all over the board, and it's not a universal truth. There's certainly environments where SDR AE model works, particular larger deals, more complex sales and things like that. But the last company that I was at, Qualia, mid-market, low enterprise sale, full cycle sales reps. I'm trying to find people who still like to prospect, who want full control over their deal, want to follow up, want to run the demos, and want to be in the closing seat. And I think it'll make a resurgence. I think there's whispers of it still, and I'm excited to see how it all goes down.
Scott, I got a question for you. So you talked about the Aaron Ross model. People hear it and they're like, oh man, I got to go and get these specialists and stuff. Is it just contract value to decide that? Or is it how do you decide if you're watching this and you're someone that's like, man, I'm figuring out my sales process. How do you decide yeah, I should do that. I should just have SDRs that just do SDRs. I should have A's that are full cycle or not full cycle. How do you, when you coach an org, how do you diagnose that they're doing the right thing?
Well, I would never say it's just price point, but that is one of the things that I'm trying to learn about and filter for. The complexity of the sale is a big one. How many influencers are involved in a deal, or am I able to just talk to the decision maker straight away? How technical is it? The more technical and complex, a lot of times, the more specialized the sales roles, need to be. The length and duration of the sales cycle is a big one. The buyer experience. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but if I go to buy something, I really don't want to talk to Josh and then get passed over to John and then have Ryan run the demo for me. My head is spinning. I'm like, who's my point of contact? So I think you got to think about what that buying journey is like. And if I'm talking to smaller kind of businesses, I think they care about that stuff a lot more. If I'm talking to enterprise businesses that are engaged in that same kind of buying process, I think they're used to it, and it doesn't doesn't affect them or doesn't bother them too much. I have to think about organizational complexity. This doesn't get spoken about enough, but if I have a team of 10 full cycle sellers, that is easier for me to manage as a sales leader than having, 6 SDRs, 3 AEs, 1 sales engineer, right? Those are all different roles. Those different roles have different KPIs. They're going to have different comp plans. It's a different way to recruit, right? It just gets really complicated. So I'm having conversations with folks trying to gauge their readiness for that model versus a full cycle model with all these different, touch points.
That's actually really cool and interesting. So you're telling us, if you're listening to this and you have maybe your sales process isn't all that complicated, you don't need 8 different types of reps with specialties and different things in the sales process. Just have one person be a hero and do it all, right?
That's one data point to look at. Yeah. I mean, there's going to be exceptions probably, but I don't know. I think back to the first sales gig I ever had. I was selling in 2004. I was selling online lead generation tools to real estate agents. Okay. It was a transactional kind of sale. It's like $300 to $1,000 a month. Okay. Am I going to call up a real estate agent and say, hey, I'd love to set up an appointment for you to talk to Jonathan about such and such? No, there wasn't even a product demo, right? It wasn't that kind of thing. It was services, it was leads, right? So it wouldn't make sense. And it happens all the time. I get on, calls, people ask me for my advice. I learn about what they do, and it's that kind of model. And I'm like, whoa. You don't need an SDR AE model right here. So.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. One thing I was thinking about too, so the complexity of your deal is one aspect of it. If you're full cycle, I think another problem is AEs lose that prospecting mentality once they've had a meeting, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, AEs everywhere are more entitled than you can believe right now. They'll sit around and not know what to do with themselves because nobody has put a demo on their calendar. They'll literally say, oh, I'm going to miss my number because my SDR sucks. It's like, listen, what did you do to stack your own calendar? Where were you prospecting to supplement and taking control of your own ability to hit your number? You think you just be spoon-fed all the time? Come on. So that era of entitlement is a big, big problem. It drives me absolutely bonkers these days. Oh, and then you got a whole other issue if you're in that environment, right? Now, from a leadership perspective, now I got to manage that kind of personality. How do I fix that? And how do I fix that systemically if I've got a team of 10, 20 AEs who all think that way? I'm in big, big trouble.
So we had a question from the audience too, and the question is for Scott. Customers, they're saying, are you saying customer success roles aren't leveraged so much in the LE? I believe that's large enterprise space, but more in the SMB space?
No, I'm not talking about customer success at all. I'm talking about all before we've closed somebody. Okay. I'm talking about the prospecting, the setting up the appointment, the running the demo, the closing a deal. What we do once the deal is closed is a whole other conversation. Whether some people believe that a salesperson should stay involved and act more as a growth account kind of manager, or whether once a deal is closed, we should pass it over to somebody on the customer success team where there's an onboarder, and then, at some sort of timestamp and success criteria, here comes the AM, the account manager, whose job is to cross-sell, upsell, grow the account. That's a whole other kind of conversation.
I've actually been developing a little bit of a hot take. So we're talking about prospecting after you do your first meeting and you're getting other team members at the company. Let's say you sell to a bunch of people. You want to build a whole buying team that you sell into, right? I think I got a hot take. I want to jam this with you for a second. I'm still, it's a developing hot take, so it's not perfect. I'm kind of starting to think that, especially with these businesses that sell subscription, authority is kind of dying. It used to be I want to get to the person with authority. I want to give them a contract. I want them to sign it and all that stuff. But the problem is when you sell an authority, you end up getting a person in the funnel that signs a contract. And the reason that all these team members end up using the service or the suite of things that you're selling is because your boss told you to. And then that leads to a year later, people churning and leaving and going to other places and not being happy with your service. And you end up getting a lot of churn. The thing I'm kind of starting to develop a little bit more with building buying teams and talking with people is it's actually a lot more about influence. What do you think of that, Scott? Like, if you want to break that down. I know I just said a lot.
Yeah, well, as you were talking, I was just sort of thinking about consensus and group kind of selling. And, you know, there is a world, sure, where you go right after the authority figure, the person with decision-making power, and they buy and they push the tool and the product on down to their team. Well, that team might not even know why they have that particular tool. They might be completely unaware of the problem. That's going to lead to like crappy adoption, right? And sort of a change management issue. Whereas maybe if we took our time a little bit more and we talked to the front end users of the product, the people managing those folks, the execs that are going to see the economic impact of it, right? These kind of things. Now you've got more of a consensus and everybody's kind of on the same page. So the thesis would be people are more willing to onboard quickly. They're more willing to get in and use the product, enjoy it, and that's going to be a stickier account. So I hear what you're saying for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think anyone watching this is probably going to be hearing this trend. There's going to be a ton of companies. All right, this is going deep. I want to introduce our next guest first before I go deep into this and go off the range here. Everybody say hi to Josh Norman. Josh Norman's SVP of Sales at Vimeo. He worked at Hootsuite before. He worked at Brightcove. Like you're kind of a marketing and video tech whiz when it comes to background for this stuff. What's up, Josh?
Hey there. Hi, guys. How's it going?
Good. And by the way, Scott and Josh, if you guys want to verbally trade barbs or talk to each other, you don't need us to do that. If you have anything you want to just jump in and add stuff. Like, here's something that's happening, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to have Josh on here today. The more organizations that we talk to, I think everybody knows this, sales is really struggling to hire. Everybody's having trouble with hiring at every company. The Great Resignation stuff's filling in roles and losing roles. So even if you're hiring 10 people are leaving. A lot of people are bored, so they look for jobs and stuff when they're sitting at home and stuff. What I think is going to happen is something that Josh is actually a lot more involved with, and I'd be curious to pick your brain on this. And Scott, you too, of course. There's more organizations that are kind of going to be hugging product-led growth next year because of the hiring problem. And I think a company that's doing a stellar job of product-led growth is probably Vimeo. So I wanted to kind of pick your brain on this, Josh, and Scott, obviously, too. What about if you're doing product-led growth and you're trying to get a full cycle rep from account creation to closing? Like, what's that process like?
Yeah, it's interesting that there's a lot there we could talk about for sure. I mean, look, I think product-led growth is sort of one of the business model du jour, totally independent of the big resignation and sort of the the fact that salespeople and everybody in tech is demanding and getting a lot more compensation right now, and probably well deserved. But product-led growth, I think, is a big differentiator for a lot of companies because it just gives you such a lower cost of acquisition. And then what you decide to do with that in terms of, is that if you call it the PQL motion, sort of product qualified leads, is that SDRs that qualify? If they're true, qualified hand raisers, do they go right to an AE for a full sales cycle? Sort of depends on a lot of the same things Scott was saying. It's, complexity of the sale, technical nature, organizational complexity you're navigating, customer expectation. But I think all of these questions about sales model, full cycle, I think you always have to start with the customer and work your way back. What's the customer expectation? What's their, what do they need to see to make a buying decision? How much of that can be done organically before they even ever talk to a salesperson, through marketing, through product, versus how much is assisted through human interaction? I think a lot of those things dictate it. It's really funny if you talk to your average VC or private equity firm, they will talk about sales models as if they're interchangeable. It's like, well, you want an SDR AE model because it's super cost effective, infinitely scalable, and it's, the ROI is great and it looks beautiful. Well, that's great, but you haven't talked about the customer or the product yet. And so I think that people are figuring out like PQL is just such a huge differentiator. In our case, we've got 250 million free users that sort of then funnel into our, roughly 1.7 million paid users. And it does give us a big differentiator. And I think it's really hard to achieve scale without that sort of, bottoms up adoption. And it all comes back to what Scott was saying a minute ago about, the days of sort of push down technology from the top. Sure, it still happens. Look, Oracle, Salesforce, those companies are not going anywhere. Let's be clear. But you're right. You have a churn problem. You have an adoption problem that no top down selling can overcome. You need, the nice thing that PQL does is it gives you that groundswell of bottoms up adoption, which then sort of commands the attention of the CIO, the CMO, whoever, to say, wow, like without putting any contract in place, I've got hundreds and hundreds of users who have adopted this technology. So I think that's one of the more favorable business models that we're seeing right now.
I'm going to kick something to Scott because I want to get Scott's thoughts on this. If you're coaching somebody, Scott, let's say you have an AE and they're like, hey, help me, I don't know what I'm doing. And they work at an org and they get someone that comes in and let's say they're at a product-led growth company like Vimeo. They come in, they make their leads come in and they make accounts. What do you coach them on for outreach? Like, what do they do to approach those leads?
Well, I think I want to understand what brought them my way. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Should I make a hypothetical example or or are you saying that's just like a best practice to know what brought them in?
I'm saying it's a best practice.
Okay.
Right. Regardless of the reason, I want to know why. Like, what brought you here? What are you thinking? What are the challenges you're going through? What have you tried before that worked? What have you tried before that didn't work? Right? Are we still using, depends on what the product is, but like, are we using software? Are we using sticky notes still? Like, what am I dealing with? And then I'm trying to understand in what sort of time horizon, are we looking to do something? Where does this sit on the list of priorities? Is this $1 million problem or $100,000 problem? And $100,000 problem for some companies is the number one thing on the priority list. And $1 million problem for some companies is number 100 on the priority list. I'm trying to understand, like, why are we here? What are we trying to solve? What's the impact it's going to be? And that's the place where I start. I certainly don't start with, and Josh, feel free to disagree with me if you do, but I certainly don't start with, well, thanks for filling out this form. And I'm Scott with a company called Vimeo.com, and we do blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. That is not what I would be coaching people to do. Spitting game about their product. It's the absolute opposite. I'm trying to seek to understand before I do anything else.
No, 100%, Scott. It all starts with need. 100% starts with need. And if you don't get that right, almost nothing else in the sales process matters if you've not qualified for need. And I think the biggest mistake that I see sort of reps making, I think, John, you were talking about this at the top of the hour, sort of like why a qualifier might struggle as an AE is that difference between interest and need, right? It's easy to get a first date. It's hard to get that second date. And like anyone will take a 30-minute call to hear about a product, a company, especially if it's a cool brand name in a hot space. It's like, sure, I'll take free education for half an hour, but like, can you get that follow-up? Well, a lot of times people will say, sure, I'll take a follow-up because I just don't want to be rude and say no. And so people will waste your time is like almost infinitely. And so as a sales professional, if you believe time is your one true sort of finite asset, then like you cannot sort of spend time on things until you understand, is there need and what is it and can I solve it? And so I think, yeah, Scott, it doesn't matter if it comes from PQL, comes inbound, comes outbound, you're still trying to answer that same question, like what is the need? And then everything sort of flows from there.
Funny, it reminds me of all the polls that I see on LinkedIn. What job is harder, SDR or AE? Like you just kind of solved it right there. Like I mean, I've been an SDR, I've had success as an SDR, but like I sucked at it at the same time too sometimes. But it's kind of easy to get that first meeting. It's a lot harder to get the second. I mean, if you're doing all things correctly, yeah, there's a lot of work that gets put into it. But at the same time, that second date is just a lot harder to get.
Yeah, look, it's certainly it's easy to get a meeting. I'd say, is it easy to get a quality, meeting? Probably. That's much harder. So to get a proper qualified meeting, that is a real skill. I started as an SDR many years ago. I think many great sales professionals do, and I think it's the one place. If you think about like sort of the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours theory, you're really you're doing 100 to 150 calls a day for a year plus. If you're doing it right, you just get that pattern recognition of, okay, this is what a good meeting looks like. This is what a good lead looks like. And then to Scott's point earlier, if you can then get the opportunities to follow it through and see what happens after I pass it, and like which are the ones that are closing, and will that AE let me team with them to sort of follow a lead, or will they let me actually work one at one point? Then you start to kind of really get ready for that next step. But you're really it's getting quality meetings, I do still think is incredibly hard and takes a lot of skill.
And it makes getting that second meeting a lot easier if you set everything up correctly.
Well, do you even want the second meeting? Like, do you want the second?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to assess that for yourself too. It's like,
exactly.
Can I get you to take a second meeting? Probably. Is it worth my time to take that second meeting? That's the question you're really trying to answer.
Here's a question for you guys. Well, you were talking about the groundswell and getting bottom up. Can sales help with that? Like, at Vimeo, does sales reps do anything to get one user to turn into 5 users? And if they do, what do they do?
Yeah, so the answer is absolutely. So it's sort of funny. I think PQL has become like the business model du jour. But the truth is, before the algorithm can figure out the signal as to like this user is the one that is more likely to upgrade because of these actions versus this user, how do you train the algorithm? Well, you do it through customer interaction. That's still a salesperson or an SDR talking to the customer to figure out, hey, I see you're doing this. Would you benefit from this? And so you still have to train, what that PQL is. I will tell you that, we still brute force a lot. And we have a ton of bodies, and my team's close to 300 people now. I think about 60 of them are SDRs, and a lot of what you would traditionally call a PQL is still us reaching down into that user and saying, you look like the one that should upgrade. And we're getting really good at identifying them and getting them to sort of into a sales cycle. But a true PQL, you don't have to touch them. They raise their hand, and through some product action, they go into a sales flow because they've done this, and this, and they look like X. It's they now say, hey, I'm now ready to upgrade to this next thing. And you can do that through, putting caps in the product or usage or users, whatever. But like right now, we do more brute force than we do having a user just magically sort of flow in. I will enjoy that day. I'll probably have to work, half as hard as I do now when they're all just raising their hand and trying to get me to take credit card orders. But until then, yeah, we're using human beings.
I'm going to interject. I love this conversation because if you're paying attention, Josh works at a product-led growth company. He has 300 people on his team, 60 SDRs, and he's talking about brute forcing something. Now, I can't stand LinkedIn polls, so I will not do this. But if I put a poll out there that asks people's definition of product-led growth, I would guarantee you that the majority of people would assume that it means there is no sales team and the product itself is doing the selling. And so people have the definition of it totally confused and confounded, because here's a guy with a 300-person team, 60 SDRs going to war every single day with brute force. That's still product-led, right? And they can't exist. If I heard him right, they can't exist and thrive without those salespeople.
100%. And we have these funny conversations internally when we do planning, and I listen to the product managers talk about like, we're going to automate this next year, and this will be automated. You won't even need those salespeople, and it's just going to be all automated in the product. And I say, great. Like, and I smile and I nod and I say, that's going to be amazing. We're going to make so much money. It's going to be beautiful. Meanwhile, I got to get my headcount plan together, because until you automate it, I still have a quota to hit. And, and look, I would love to be replaced by the algorithm, and I'll put my feet up on a beach somewhere. But, it's my replacement years from now might enjoy that. But like in the meantime, I'm going to hire a sales team, and we're going to sell. The last thing I would
love
just say
that.
too is a PQL is just a funnel, right? And so if you're driving people through a funnel, or if you're outbounding them to get them into a sales cycle, a PQL just means that you've got somebody to use your product somewhere along that sort of that self-service journey. And so rather than filling out a survey, downloading a white paper, or joining a webinar, they're just using a free version of the product, and then through the signals, they become qualified. It's no different than someone that attends a webinar. It's still a user that's taking an action. It just happens to be that the action they're taking is to use a free version of your product. And in theory, that makes it stickier. They if you do it right, they like the service. There's no reason to look elsewhere. So it's a great business model, but it's still just a funnel. I think people sometimes lose sight of that.
There's a big difference too between, a lot of people use the term product. By the way, everyone listening, we're talking about product-led growth a lot because I think a lot of orgs are going to be doing that stuff in the next year. And it's interesting for Josh's use case, because they're like, Vimeo is basically, I mean, it's been over a decade where you guys have been like product first when you come in, and then you work with a rep. We're literally using Vimeo's enterprise stuff for streaming this to you right now. That's how you're seeing this. Little plug for you guys. But one thing I'm thinking about is, let's say you get one of those signals, you get one of those triggers that says, yeah, I should probably reach out to this person. What do you, Scott, when you coach someone, what are you telling them to say? I know you talked about the questions earlier about like, is this $100,000 problem or $1 million problem? But like, are you calling first? Or are you emailing first? Like, what's the process so you're not just feel like you're harassing a user that's coming in and already paying some money with you?
Well, number one, I never feel like I'm harassing anybody. So this goes back to what I was saying about being careful of the words that we choose to tell ourselves. Like,
yeah,
if I tell myself I'm harassing somebody, I will be less likely to take an action. So I don't tell myself that. I'm just giving some coaching to the marketers potentially a little bit on this call. It depends what the trigger is.
Yeah.
Like, what did that user of the product do or not do? I mean, I might see them create some sort of report, and I might give them a buzz, give them a call, and ask, like, did you get the data that you were looking for? What decision did you make from that report? Have you thought about creating these other reports that somebody else in your role builds? I might email them if I saw them take some course of action and say, hey, how was that process? Was it intuitive? Was there anything missing? Did anything break? Like, you have any feedback from me? Trying to, again, any kind of dialogue that I can have, whether it's email or phone call, I'm just getting information. And the more information I get, and the more engagements and interactions I have with this person in the trial or in the funnel, I feel like is advantageous for me. I'm building a little bit of a relationship. I'm learning about what their needs are, how they're using it, how they're thinking about it moving forward, what's frustrating them, what couldn't they figure out. I can circle that feedback back to our product team potentially and say, hey, I got 5 accounts in a row that can't figure out how to, add another user. That's a problem. Something's not intuitive, right? So I'm just trying to learn all of those kind of things. I'm not trying to do anything specific like, okay, how do I immediately sell Jonathan like 10 more seats? That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to learn stuff, trying to interact, trying to build a relationship. And, I'll know based on how those dialogues go, like, if they're open to and having a good experience. One of the things you don't want to do is try to upsell somebody when they're in the throes of a bad experience. You don't ask people something when you're coming from a position of weakness. You wait till you're in a position of strength to lob that question out there. Josh is smiling over here at me. Go ahead.
I'm laughing because I've lived through all of those things when I've lived at companies where you have product outages and instability issues, and so then the head of marketing or someone sends up and says, we're going to offer them a premium support package. Yeah, go try to sell a $25,000 support package to somebody when the basic support just let the service fall down during their whatever, their website's down. It's like, you're exactly right. Like, you can't, like, selling, that's the worst time to sell to somebody, is when they're having a problem with your product. But I totally agree. Just going back to what you said a minute ago, I totally agree. Like, you can't think of reaching out to customers as bugging them or annoying them. Like, you fundamentally have to believe that you are a purveyor of value. Like, the thing I have, the product, the knowledge I have about it is valuable to the person on the other line, however you're reaching out to them, and therefore it's worthy to be reaching out to them. And by the way, if you don't feel like that, then you got to reevaluate, like, what am I doing here? Because then, yes, if you don't feel like the thing you have is valuable, or you feel like your knowledge of it is insufficient, then yes, it's going to feel like I'm annoying this person. I don't feel like I've earned the right to ask them. But as long as you believe in the thing you're selling and it's valuable, and I think I learned pretty early on too, you'd get intimidated talking to a chief marketing officer or a CIO, and those folks are brilliant and talented, but they're also inch deep, kind of mile wide across like entire sections of technology. And I'm an expert in one specific product in one specific area. And there's an old saying that says you only need to know one more thing than the customer to be an expert, and it's true. And so as long as you know your product, you know your solution, the value it offers to the users in that space, you've earned that right to kind of call and tell that customer how they're going to benefit. But then what Scott was saying about not wanting to upgrade, it's like you can't get on the call with the goal of selling them that 10 user upgrade. What's the say? No one likes to be sold to. Everyone likes to buy things. And so you have to understand, like, what is it that they want to buy and why, like, what's the problem they're solving? And then therefore, now here's the solution. If you preempt the solution before you know what they're trying to buy, you're going to fail virtually every time, unless you just get lucky.
All right, so I've got a little tip based on what you guys said. And I did say the term harass, by the way, to set this up, because I am a facilitator, and I will facilitate the hell out of both you guys. I don't care what they say. One tip that I kind of take away from this, and people have probably heard me say this before, but you want to give more than take whenever you're doing something or communicating with a customer to try and help them. And you guys both talked about value as a key word. One tip I'd recommend is, after this webinar, whether you're an IC or a manager or whatever you're doing at your company, write down a list of ways that you can give to your customer. Not just product wisdom is one of them, resources at your company is another, your network, customer stories you might know, wisdom, but like, make a big list of things that you can offer someone to help them, and start building around those things in your touch points. Like, I feel like that's kind of what you were telling me, Scott, is like, let's say I ran a report and exported data and looked at it, and you see that as an activity inside the product. You could you're not just going to say, hey, did you get what data were you looking for? Did you get what you're looking for? The reason you're asking that is if they answer back with a powerful answer, you'll know how to you'll know how to guide them the right way and be the Sherpa.
Yeah.
Which you do have some Sherpa like looks yourself. I think there's some Sherpa things going on there. If I were going up a mountain, I'd want you to guide me there, please.
I'm honored.
What'd you say?
I was going to say, we actually have a question from the audience also, especially if you guys are going to be working, it sounds like you're going to have to do a lot more research into accounts and what everybody's doing. But Scott Parker had a question. Thoughts on a good number of accounts per rep? Obviously depends on client maturity and need, but is there a good baseline or range?
It's a huge range. And Scott, I'd be curious to get your perspective too. It really, really depends. I know that's like, it's a lame answer because it's so caveated, but it's are you going after SMB, mid-market, commercial, strat? Is it a vertical solution? It's are you territory based? What I will say is, like, having carried a bag those years when I was a territory owner or a named account hunter, it's this sort of double-edged sword of, the sales rep usually wants, a bunch, because they want to know, like, any one of these customers that raises their hand, I want to make sure that falls into my bucket. But the truth is, if you give somebody 100 accounts, you're going to touch maybe 20 or 30 with any real rigor. If you're doing strategic kind of high-end selling, right? If you're volume based, maybe it's a bit different. But I've worked in models where, look at if you're at VMware or if you're at Cisco, the global account manager for General Electric at VMware, who I know he's moved on there, but he was there for 7 or 8 years. Yeah, he's got a 30 or 40 person team that's just supporting that single account because they spend, I don't know, 30, 40, $50 million a year with VMware. So if you're VMware, how big is your account list? In that case, it's one. It really sort of depends on what you're trying to do and where. But if you're greenfield trying to break into an sort of new sector, it's mostly net new logo acquisition. Sure, you can give somebody 70 to 100 accounts. They're not to have a strategic account plan, executive outreach, account research, sort of ABM based kind of campaigns. I don't know how a sales rep's going to do justice to 70 to 100 accounts. Now, but at the same time, I don't know a lot of sales reps that are going to say, sure, give me 10 accounts, no existing pipeline, and that it's my feast or famine. So it's an art and science of like, how many do you have to give them to sort of get them to take the job and sort of take the pursuit. But the goal would be over time, if you do your job right, that list is getting smaller and smaller, and you keep peeling it off and sort of layering in new reps. But yeah, it's hard to put an exact kind of number on it, I think. But Scott, what's your take?
Well, I think that's actually a super important question to ask in an interview process where you're choosing to take on a job or not. It's how many accounts per rep and why. Explain to me why. Right? Is like Josh said, it could be 5, it could be a couple hundred potentially if it's a super high velocity kind of sale. So just ask somebody to explain why. How many accounts per rep and why. And one of the things that I don't think Josh touched upon, but like your TAM is super important as well, right? Total number of accounts in your universe is going to play some part in how you model out the organization and figure out like, well, what's the maximum number of reps I need in this like first phase. So for example, if I'm like a Series A org that's going to market for the first time, I'm trying to figure out like, well, how many AEs am I going to need potentially to hit everything? It's a good place to start is like, what's my total universe of accounts? And like Josh said, it's going to shrink, which salespeople are terrified of hearing, by the way. Have you ever met a salesperson who was happy about the fact that their total number of accounts in their book was shrinking, even though in theory it meant the company was doing that much better? I've never met one. It's all fear-based, right? So
that's a great answer, actually. I've always thought of this hypothetical world. What do you both think would happen if your best reps you've worked with only had 5 accounts to work? How many of them, and they're not customers yet? Like, what would happen to you, Josh, if like one of your golden goose amazing accounts, you only had 5 that they could break into? I know, ignore economics and time and all that stuff. I honestly think if you get into an account deeper, like it's almost like you could be a puddle deep and an ocean wide, or you could be an ocean deep and a puddle. I don't know how big puddles get. It doesn't work the other way around. But you guys get what I was trying to do. On your end, Josh, what do you think your top rep would do if like they only had 5 accounts?
I don't know. Look, it probably quit. I mean, in all seriousness, it's like, if you could be successful doing that, like, yes, there is an absolute benefit of focus. Like, when we've done some named account things and different stops along the way that I've done. And yes, like when you say, the only way you're going to eat is you've got to make it from this list, and the rep is committed and you've got good product market fit. Like, you're not setting them up to fail. Like there's a there, then yes, like, you and sometimes if you believe, hey, the only way we're going to unlock this market is through focus, it's a vertical approach, it's really specific, then yeah, you sort of have to like burn the canoes and kind of be all in with the approach. But I would say it's you have to be ready to do that though, right? Like you have to have some evidence, like, hey, there's some conviction that you can be successful with only 5 reps, 5 accounts. Maybe the deal sizes are going to be huge. A single deal in those 5 accounts is going to retire your entire quota for the year. So you've got to there's absolutely a benefit of focus, but at the same time, you've got to make sure you're setting folks up for success.
Well, Josh gave like a super thoughtful, well-developed answer. What I think the reps would say, if you told them, hey, you only have 5 accounts, they'd only ask one question. how do I get paid?
Yeah, what's my quota? What's
Yeah,
the
that's
quota?
right.
How do I
What's
get
my
paid?
quota? What's my opportunity? How much am I going to get paid? Right? So I don't care if I have 5 accounts. If I close one of them and I make $1 million this year, that's fucking great. Right?
Yeah.
I'm in.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Right? But if you tell me you have to close all 5, and if you close all 5, your OT is 100K, I'm going to be like, huh? What? Oh, I don't want to overthink it too much. The initial response from my top reps, if I grab my top reps, will be like, well, what am I going to get paid?
Yeah, great point. Totally agree.
So we've talked a lot about full cycle. We've talked about buying teams a little bit. Let's talk about coaching a little bit. So let's say someone on your teams are working a bunch of accounts. They've got opportunities they've created. But they've just had deals that have been stalling for a couple months. Are they really deals, or are there some things you can do to coach them? Like, what makes deals stall, I guess, if you have something in your pipeline?
Well,
I don't know who wants to answer first.
Can I pick on the word? I'm going to pick on the words again. Like,
Yeah.
we use the word deals right there. A deal didn't stall. A conversation stalled. An opportunity stalled. Right? So
Yeah.
you said there, like, well, is it really a deal? No, it's not a deal. Take that shit off the verbal board. Okay? It's not a deal. We have a conversation that stalled. We have an opportunity that stalled. And can they be resurrected? Of course they can be resurrected, and they should be resurrected. And then it just gets into the when and the how and all that kind of stuff, right? So go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. To me, one of the funnest things I ever get to do is like when a deal has been in the pipeline, or an opportunity has been in the pipeline for a year, I get to stand up at a forecast meeting and say, like, who wants to send that customer a birthday cake for our 1 year of being an opportunity together? And so, yeah, look, in my experience, when things stall, it comes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's almost always because we just don't know the need, right? If there's a true need, if you qualify for need, then usually it's not that hard to qualify the rest of the process. I think reps go out of order a lot, right? And so it's like, I'm not sure if there's need. There seems to be interest, but I don't know if there's a concrete need with business value and outcomes. But I'm going to do a demo because maybe they want to see the product. And I'm going to introduce a sales engineer, and I'm going to even show them pricing. And so you're doing all these things. Then you look in Salesforce and you're like, wow, you're in the pricing stage. That's 75% close rate for us. But you never identified need. So it's sort of like, you do not pass go directly to jail. It's like, and that is the vast majority of time when conversations stall. It's because the sales rep is going out of order. I see it all the time when deals push at the end of the quarter. Like, we're in contract, customers committed to signing the last day, and then it's like, oh, just kidding, additional technical due diligence required. Well, why didn't we know that? We didn't ask the right questions. We went out of order. We thought we were at contract. The customer thinks we're at technical due diligence. It's almost always going out of order. You've got to just go back. And so and need's the first step. So if you don't know the need, nothing downstream matters if you've gotten that step wrong.
So we have another question from the audience. This one's from Chad Spain. I'm going to try to put a little bit of a twist on it. So you have a product-led company. What are some tips that you can give to an account executive working that company that you see is already signed up for self-serve? How do you keep that person intrigued in the product, using the product? Like, what are some things that you can do that your product necessarily can't do?
I think you can tell them about what other people that look like them are doing with it. People love hearing about, how does somebody else gain value from this, particularly somebody in my sector, a direct competitor of mine. Customers always want to know, like how does somebody else have an edge on them that I need to know about, that I can sort of try to gain back. And so, telling people about how others are benefiting, I think is because it's sort of like benchmarking. You're telling the customer where they are along a maturity curve in a particular area. So I love that trick as one tactic.
Yeah, and it's the story that you tell around that as well, right? So it's very different to say, hey, Ryan and John started a podcast, and you might want to start a podcast too, versus saying, hey, Ryan and John started a podcast, They're up to 100,000 downloads. They have 5 sponsors, and this podcast that started off as a joke now has a $250,000 annual revenue number. That's a very different conversation in the power of those particular words and those stories.
That's right. And we're sponsored by Surf and Sales. Go check out Surf and Sales.
That's right.
You like that?
Yeah, I cut them a $250,000 check every year.
I'll send you an invoice. That's a great tip. We have a question from Julie Reynolds regarding ghosting. So what happens if you have a hard time getting in touch with a demo or chat? Like what are some tactics you can do to get someone back? The cake idea was cool. That's kind of interesting, but that takes a year.
I mean, look, customers ghost when you've given them all the information they need, without committing their resources. I think this is what I said earlier about, like, if you give them the demo, you give them the pricing, and then they're like, great, thanks. I'm going to go research 6 other companies just like you, and I'll just pick one randomly. And so, you've got to give to get. You've got to have a mutually agreed upon action plan, all those things where, it's like, and also look, schedule the next call while you're on the first call. Don't say, I'll send you an email with some times. Don't leave that call until you know the next time you're checking in.
What do you think, Scott? Any tips on how to avoid ghosting or how to deal with ghosting when it happens?
I'll deliver a unpopular hot take here.
Ooh.
Ready?
Yeah. Let's do it. I love hot takes. I'm in.
People who ghost me are dead to me, and I don't follow up. I don't chase. I don't go begging. Okay? Now, depend on who you are and what you do and what you sell and the demand or the need for your product and that kind of thing. There's different amounts of leverage. But if you're fortunate enough to be in a place, like I was saying before, a position of strength versus weakness, then you don't have to go chase and hunt them down. What I find with people who ghost is, like Josh said, they got the information that they needed and then they take off. So I'll try to follow up with them once, maybe twice, but then I let them go, because my belief is whatever they're going to go do or not do is probably going to fail, and they're going to end up coming back to me when they're ready. And when they do, I'm going to politely say, I told you so, welcome back, let's talk. So I don't track people down super aggressively. I don't get my feelings hurt about it. I never get attached to any one single opportunity. My goal is to have so many different opportunities that I don't care about this ghost.
I love that, Scott. I'm going to add one more too, which is the one I see this a lot where you've got a deal set to close at end of the month, end of the quarter, and I'll ask the manager or the sales rep, hey, do we have a backstop meeting set up? Do we have the AE kick, the AM CSM kickoff call scheduled, as a backstop? And they'll say, no, like, we've got so much access, like, they answer a call, we're LinkedIn connected. I don't need to do that. Like, I've got access. And my answer is always, you have access until you don't. And when you don't have access, it's like impossible to get it back. And look, why do those things happen? Customers get embarrassed. They misrepresent their ability to buy. I firmly, my hot take is that I think, other than a procurement officer, nobody in any company of any size has any clue how they buy anything, And so when you're qualifying the buying process, you need to qualify that like 26 times, because you're going to get a different answer every time, and you have to qualify it every single step. I went into the next step. Let's requalify. What's different about it now that we're to this step? Because it's constantly changing, because they don't know. And so when they've misrepresented that signature at end of month because they didn't know their own buying process, they're embarrassed and they will go dark on you. And that's why, like, you've got to maintain access while you have it. You should assume it's going to go away at some point because of that reason.
Amazing. All right, we have another question, or last question from the audience. This one's specifically for Josh. Can you, what is your biggest challenge as a sales leader in a quickly growing company?
Oh man, I mean, I have so many challenges. I mean, look, I mean, finding and retaining amazing people when you're going through sort of blitz scaling and you're growing fast. I started 5 years ago. I was employee 1 in the sales group, and now we're up to, about 300. And it's like you can't find great people fast enough. It's a really hot, competitive market, and that is a constant challenge. I think for me that is one. I think the other one is, and this I don't think this is unique to me, but having confidence that that you can feed every mouth you're hiring with quality pipeline, PQLs, market, and opportunity. Like you never want to set anybody up to fail, and I think too often, CFOs, if you're looking at salespeople on a spreadsheet, their numbers. It's like, well, if we overhire 20, then we'll cut back the following year. Well, that is the worst. Like, I do not want to approach things that way. Like, I want to know, like, with every incremental hire, do they have the same opportunity to be successful as the previous hire? And then what's my contribution to that, which is training them, investing in them, giving them great opportunity, giving them strong managers, giving them leads and pipeline and playbooks for outbound and things like that. And then what's their opportunity? What do they bring to the table? Are they skilled? Are they hungry? Are they willing to invest the time? Are they going to punch out in 6 months if it's too hard? And so finding people in this environment, I think what Scott was saying earlier about the entitlement, and you could debate that word, but salespeople are ruthlessly efficient. And so if sales is sort of like walking along the beach picking up seashells, well, salespeople would much rather pick up these perfectly pristine, uncracked seashells sitting directly on top of the sand. But once those are picked over, it's the real sales reps that are going to like, hey, you know what? I'm okay. I see a corner of one, but I'm going to dig away and brush it, and I'm going to get the seashell. And sometimes it's cracked and it's useless. Sometimes there's a beautiful seashell under there. And so you've got to find people that are hungry to go digging for those seashells. But when it's such a hot market, the salespeople are like, well, what are you going to do for me? Like, how many inbound leads am I going to get? Do I really have to have this quota because your competitor's offering me a job with similar comp with a slightly lower quota? And so it's really challenging environment out there to sort of get all those elements right is my take.
Well, thanks a lot, Josh. That's really good. The seashell thing is beautiful. You somehow painted a beautiful image for me. I want to give you guys a chance to plug stuff since we're signing off now. There will be a recording. We'll probably send it to you either Friday or Monday, I think. Scott, you want to plug anything?
Not really. I
Okay.
mean, it starts to get obnoxious if you start to list all the things that I'm up to. If
Let me-
anybody
let me-
wants to
let
reach
me
out
plug
to me,
for
reach
you.
out to me on LinkedIn.
Let me plug for you. If you want to see content on LinkedIn that's all over the place and not on one topic, if you want to see content that is not endorsed by Ryan, go check out Scott Leese's LinkedIn stuff. Josh, do you want to plug anything? I assume you guys are hiring and stuff, right?
You look, that's what I'll plug is I'll plug jobs. I'm hiring, SDRs, AEs, CSMs, AMs. I need a VP of sales operations. I need a VP of technical sales. New York, Boston, San Francisco, Sydney, London, Kiev. Like I need talented, amazing, hardworking people who are passionate about, transforming companies with video.
And digging
Thanks a
for
lot, guys,
seashells.
for doing that. Yeah,
You don't know this, Ryan, but this whole event was me interviewing for a job with Josh.
Well done, then, Scott. Well done.
I should have known. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Mazza, aka Batman. We'll see you later, I guess. Thank you guys very much. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
I said thanks like a
Thank
million
you.
times. What am I doing?